Hi, welcome to Beginning Engineers. You may have heard the saying that a dog is man's best friend and a diamond is a woman's best friend. If we were going to have a stereotype about engineers, it would be Excel, an engineer's best friend. Generalizations aside, Excel is an extremely powerful tool, and in this video I'm going to give a brief overview of what Excel is, why it's so useful, and then go into some of its functions. I'm sure all the people watching this video will have different levels of skill with Excel, so I tried to make this video cater to different skill levels. So hopefully, even if you're very experienced with Excel, you'll learn something new. So what is Excel, for those of you not very familiar? Excel is a spreadsheet application with a variety of built-in functions, graphing abilities, and a programming language that is heavily associated with it, and sometimes integrated with it. Excel was first introduced in 1985, and what really shocked me about this, I knew Excel was old, but I didn't realize it was on a Mac first, before a PC. But of course it quickly spread to Windows systems as well. It is the industry standard for spreadsheets. So I said it was old a minute ago, and that idea at first can cause a lot of laughing. 1985, 33 years ago at this point, that's not that old. But for technology, that's insanely old. Think of another piece of technology that's still around. Cars, televisions, there are very few items in that group. While of course the Excel of today doesn't look like it did originally, it's the same core concept, just improved upon drastically. And I would say the most important thing about Excel, that many people know but don't realize how much so, it is an incredibly powerful tool. The more you learn about it, the more useful it becomes. A lot of people jokingly say, especially engineers, is that Excel has been used for things it was never intended to be used for. That people have created monstrosities with it. And I've witnessed that. I've created some of those. But that's the beauty of Excel. Let's get into a basic overview of the style and functionality of Excel. Excel is really broken into two general areas. You have the ribbon, that's everything on the top half, so not all those equal rectangles. Then you have the cells, the bottom section. That top section, the ribbon, that's where all your formatting and functions are to affect your information in the cells. So you have data in your cells in the bottom half, and then you're clicking on things in the top half in the ribbon to affect that data, or make it look different. I say half because of the picture. When you have it open on your computer, the ribbon is really like 10% of the screen. The ribbon has multiple tabs, so it's not just what you're seeing in this picture. Right now the Home tab is highlighted. If you click those other words next to Home, it will completely change the ribbon and give you access to a whole new set of formulas. And a lot of them are grouped together based on similarities. Really, there are only two important things to note about cells for the time being, and I'll go into more detail on one of them later. The first thing is cells have a name. So there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of cells, but they each have their own unique name. The columns in Excel have letters. The rows have numbers. Every single cell is in a column and in a row. So when you're looking at all these complex, crazy formulas, or you hear people talking about Excel, if they say something like BC 245, that's column BC, row 245. So you'll see those being referenced in the formulas. The other item of note about cells is that you can type equals into a cell, and that allows you to type a formula. In the beginning though, when you're first learning Excel, you should probably use the drop-downs just to really get a feel for what the formulas are doing, but you'll quickly move into just typing the formulas. Okay, let's get into some of the formulas. In Excel, you use formulas to manipulate data. So in this example, I'll be using the sum function. It's a very common function used all the time. You'll note the data in my cells. In cell C2, I have a 2. In cell D2, I have a 3. So notice how the cell names C2 and D2 both have a 2 in them? That means they are on the same row, row 2. But because they are one letter apart, they are right next to each other. So now using your cursor, click on cell E2. Clicking on the cell, you will notice that the border darkens. This means you've selected the cell. We've selected the cell E2. We are going to put a formula into this cell. It is going to reference our values in C2 and D2, the data in our spreadsheet. So let's start by clicking the Formulas tab in the ribbon. In my Excel, it's 3 to the right from the Home tab. Depending on the edition of Excel you have, this might vary, although I think it's pretty standard. Once you've clicked on the Formulas tab, you'll see the ribbon change. You'll have all these little books, all these different formula options. Now, click on the book labeled Math and Trig. A list will appear. Scroll down to Sum. This is your way of saying in this cell in E2 you want to put a sum. You'll notice that the formula bar displays text where it was empty before. The formula bar is that thing I have highlighted. It's the bottom part of the ribbon, right before the letters of the column headers. You'll notice that there's text in the box, but then below it there's kind of like a floating box. That floating box actually gives you information about how to use the formula. It's very useful when you've forgotten parts of a certain formula. So you'll see it says sum, and then there are parentheses. Every formula in Excel that I've ever worked with has this format. It says equals, the name of the formula, an open parenthesis, then the cells the formula is referring to. Sometimes you'll type in numbers as well, and then a closing parenthesis. This is how you use formulas in Excel. And oftentimes too, there will be many commas within the parentheses that separate out your data, or colons, which are a way to select a large group of cells. But let's actually click on the cells we want to sum. Let's keep it basic. Click cell C2, then type in a comma, then select cell D2, then hit enter. You will notice in the cell E2 that we put our formula in, you'll see a 5 now. It summed the other two cells. And you'll also notice now, anytime you click back on E2, you'll see that formula displayed in the formula bar, telling you how the value in that cell was calculated. So that is how you would do a basic formula in Excel, and most of the other formulas work the same way. But you'll notice the genius of Excel really comes out because Excel's formulas and graphs are referential and can be very quickly and broadly applied to large sets of data. So let's say you had 5 rows of data to sum, or say 1,000. We just did the sum formula, so you would know how to do it for the first row. All you would have to do in Excel is sum that top row, then hover your cursor in the bottom right corner of the formula cell until you see that black cross appear. You'll know the cell's selected because the border will be darkened, and then go to the bottom right corner and your cursor will change into a black cross. This allows you to drag the formula. So you're not actually dragging the value in the cell, you're taking the formula in the cell and dragging it down. But what's great about Excel, and really where it's genius, is that it will take that formula and reapply it to every single row of data you have. Excel tries to guess what you want to do with the formula. So you can see in my picture on the slide, I dragged it down for the 5 rows. Or you can double click and it will automatically do it for you, which is really nice. And you'll see the value in each of those boxes is different. I'm not actually dragging that 2 down, I'm dragging the formula, which is why you see the 2 change to a 3, 4, 5, and 6. It's just taking the formula, but it's reapplying it to the new data. So if how the formulas work is the genius of Excel, then all your different graphing options would be the beauty of Excel. And I'm not going to go into this too much because it could be its own video. Almost anything in Excel could be. But what's great about Excel is that you can visualize your data with line graphs, bar charts, or pie graphs. But if you have data you're examining over a period of time or on a recurring basis that changes, you can have a visual refer to the same area of your spreadsheet. And as you update the data, you'll see the graph change in real time. It's very awesome. So you can see on my images in this slide, just by changing the number of videos I watched on a certain day, the graph changes. And you'll see that change happen as soon as you click enter or click off the cell. And any graph in Excel should work this way, not just line graphs. Not only can you visualize data with graphs and charts, but you can actually make your cells look different based on the values in them. This is known as conditional formatting. Start by clicking on your Conditional Formatting drop-down button. You will find it in the Home ribbon. You have all these different options for how you want to set your rules into place. I always start with New Rule because I think it's the most generic, broad option to start with. Once you click New Rule, or any of the other options, you'll get to a pop-up box that has a rule for how you should format your data. Maybe you're looking for values above the average, or just the max value, or just the min value, or you can even do cells that contain a specific phrase or word. These are your rules. The other part of conditional formatting is how you want the cell to look. So if the cell has data that matches a rule, it will change the way it looks. Maybe it's filled in with a different color. Maybe the font is a different color. Maybe it's underlined. This is very useful for when you have large sets of data and you're trying to isolate some of the cells to quickly with your eye catch what is different. So in my example, I have 10 students and each one has a test score. In the top box, I say average score and I show the average score. I then have a rule in place where any student who scores above the average score, their cell becomes green, so I can immediately see how each student did. And what's great is, say I was a teacher and I had a class of 10 students, never more, never less. I could always copy their test grades and then right-click on the box next to student 1 and paste their grades, which would then fill the grades for students 1 through 10. And because my average score box, the box that actually shows the numeric value, because that's an average based on the cells below, it would update automatically to reflect the average 10 scores, the average of the 10 scores. And because the conditional formatting is still in place, it would change the color of the cells based on the grade. Beyond using Excel as a way to analyze or visualize data, you can actually use it just to manipulate data, to take data from the internet or another spreadsheet or a Word file and actually just manipulate it, make it look different so it's easier to work with. Excel is actually pretty good as a data manipulator. You can separate out lists, you can combine values, or you can even cut down values to be a certain length. To split values apart, you go to your Data ribbon, so click on the Data tab, then you click on the button Text to Columns. This will take something you usually paste in one column and split it out into multiple columns, depending on the delimiter you use. And a delimiter is something that separates your data. So say for example, I have a list of names, a first name, a space, and a last name. Maybe I got it on a website, maybe I got it on a Word document. Either way, you can paste it into Excel, select all the values, click Text to Columns, and then click your space delimiter option. Then by clicking Finish, you'll see that it splits the first and last name value in each cell into two separate columns. Now we have a column of just first names and a column of just last names. Now let's say you have values you want to combine. So you found a list of first and last names, but when you paste them into Excel, they're separate. Or there's something in between them that you want to remove and then combine the first and last names. Well, in this case, you would use a formula called concatenate. At this point, if you're new to Excel, maybe you're only used to clicking on the formulas in the Formula tab. But let's actually try to type this out. So click on the cell where you want to combine multiple values. Then type equals, that's how you do any formula, concatenate. What's nice about Excel is, as you start to spell the formula, you might actually see it appear, which will allow you to double click it, or sometimes press the enter button, depending on the computer you are on. Then type the open parenthesis, and everything after this open parenthesis will be concatenated. So this is where you type in or click the cells you want to concatenate, and make sure from left to right you put the cells in the order you want to combine them. And what's nice about Excel is that you can either click on each cell and then type a comma to separate them so that Excel knows you're done with each cell, or you can actually type in the cell. So you could type in D2 or C3. And Excel, because you're in your formula function, it knows you're referring to a cell. Then use a comma to separate each cell that you want to combine. Concatenate also allows you to put your own text between different cells. So in my example, I selected I4, put a comma, then using the quotes, I actually typed in a space. This way, the first name and the last name would have a space between them. Then I typed a comma again, then I selected cell J4. Then make sure you put a closing parenthesis to finish your formula, then hit enter. And you'll see that it concatenated, it combined the two cells you selected, or multiple cells in your scenario, and any text you want to put in as well. You can also use Excel to slim down your data. That is, make it a certain number of characters long. So in this example, we're going to use the formula left. There is also one called right as well. So in your cell that you want to put your value in, type equals left, open parentheses, then this function requires two inputs. The first input is the cell that contains the data that you want to trim back, that you want to shorten the length of. or at least limit to a certain size. So in this example, I selected someone's last name in cell J4. Then you put your comma and the number for the number of characters from the left, so starting on the left, that you want the length of the value to be limited to. So in this scenario, let's just say we want the first letter of everyone's last name. So just put a 1. This will only take the first character on the left of the last name value. And again, in Excel, you can drag just this formula. So it will take just the first letter of every value in the last name column. Or you can double click it and it will expand down for the whole list. What makes Excel nice is that for every formula and trick you learn, like dragging formulas or double clicking to auto drag, you can begin to combine different formulas and different tricks to really make things much more efficient and easy for you when working in Excel. So again, what is so great about Excel is that you can combine formulas in truly unique ways, and formulas and logic can actually be nested, so formulas within formulas, to build some pretty useful tools. So in the beginning of this video, I mentioned how people say Excel has been used to create monstrosities it was never intended for. Well, you can get to these complex spreadsheets by combining all these smaller, simpler functions. And a formula that you see all the time, especially in nesting of formulas, is the if statement. So this is a way you can check something about your data and say, if this is true, do this. If this is not true, do this. So based on those two options, you can probably guess how the formula will function. So let's type equals if, open parentheses, and then you'll see your tooltip, that little pop-up that tells you how the function works, telling you you have a few things you need to type for the formula to work. So the first thing you'll type is some sort of mathematical equation. If this cell is less than 5, if this cell equals 3, or you can even do it based on text. If this cell equals John, if this cell equals yellow. Then you do a comma and you put the value if it's true. So if this cell is greater than 5, you can say display text, so using quotes, that says over your limit, comma, value if it's not true. So if something's not over 5, you can say, in quotes, under the limit. So you can think about how you would use this if statement for a variety of things. In my example, I'm comparing the sales of two different employees, Casey versus Matt. So I select Casey's cell and say if that value is greater than, and I select Matt's cell, I will display Casey. So if Casey is greater than Matt, their sales, you would display who has the higher sales? Casey. If Casey's sales is not higher than Matt's, so that's not true, that's your second option, you would display Matt's. So basically, you would use an if statement to tell you who had the larger sales. And say you have more than just two options, you can put an if statement within an if statement to give you multiple routes. And instead of just displaying different text, you can actually have a formula. So if something is true, use this formula. If something is false, use this other formula. Here are a few other tips I wanted to show because they are things I find myself using pretty often in Excel. There's something called the Format Painter, which looks like a little paintbrush. This allows you to quickly copy the formatting of one cell and then apply it to the other cell, or as many other cells as you want, without going through all the options. The cell color, the text color, one by one. So first click the cell whose format you want to copy. Then click the little paintbrush. Then you'll notice the border of the cell whose format you've copied will have all these little lines. It kind of comes alive, so to speak. Then your cursor will show a paintbrush. Click on any other cell you want, and you will apply the same formatting to that cell. Another thing I find myself using quite a lot is the filter tool. This allows you to take all this data and filter it based on each column. So if you have any sort of column headers describing the data beneath it, you can make that a filter. So to use this, highlight the top of your data. So highlight all your column headers. Then on your home ribbon, go over to the little funnel, the little filter, click the drop down and select the filter option. Then you'll notice all your column headers have this little box with a downward pointing arrow. You can then click on this on any column header you want and sort things by alphabetical or by value order. But it's important to keep in mind, only those boxes, those columns with that little downward arrow on them will actually be filtered. So make sure you select all your data. Otherwise, if things are supposed to be connected across your data, so across your values, it won't filter. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. I could easily fill another 30 slides with tips and tricks in Excel. I mean, I worked in it mostly full-time for years. But I really think there's two important things you have to take away when it comes to Excel. And I've noticed this a lot with beginners, but even people more advanced can benefit from remembering this. Number one, don't be scared to play around with Excel to learn how to use it better. It's just a spreadsheet application. Open a new file, play around with formulas, you're not going to break anything. If it's not working, just close it and don't save it. Or if someone sends you a bunch of data and you're not exactly sure how to manipulate it, do a save as and have your own version. The only way you're going to get better at Excel is practicing with it. And number two, Google has an answer for almost everything in Excel. Because Excel is the industry standard and it's been around for so long, Google has a lot of great resources. If you search something, you can find dozens of sites dedicated to teaching you how to use a certain formula or functionality of Excel. So by practicing and by Googling things, you are going to get better at Excel. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope no matter what your skill level was, you learned something. If you want, feel free to subscribe. I try to have a video every month. Have a great day!